Can you still hear me?
I can. I think we're good.
Hey guys, good day. How are you all doing? It's great to see you back today. Mike, do you think we need a intro? Don't we already YouTube superstars? Everybody knows us.
My son thinks so. I did tell him I'm a YouTuber now, and then I'm making millions of dollars after advertising. And he's such a big fan of YouTube, watching the video games and the toy unpacking, that he was really excited to hear his dad was on YouTube. So he did watch about 30 seconds of the last episode before he lost his attention span and ran off. So, but yeah, no, YouTube stars definitely.
I tried that trick with my girls, and they asked for a YouTube silver button or a gold button. So that doesn't work well, because when you have more views, they tend to award you with the buttons, right? So, yeah. But anyway, let's proclaim ourselves that we are.
It's amazing how quickly he falls asleep. Yeah, no, it's helpful.
Cool. Guys, this is Raj and Mike, same guys from the previous one. I would let Mike to actually give a rundown on, recap on what happens on episode 1 before we get into the API Autopsies automation episode for this week. Mike, over to you.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So if you had the opportunity to hopefully watch last week's episode, here's a link for you. And last week we discussed 4 key points, right? We discussed the various API management operating models. So we talked about ways to deploy your API management, best practices. We talked about API management architectures. So where to place your control planes versus your data planes, how they interact, how important it is that they don't affect each other than configuration pushes. So data is not going through your control plane and being bottlenecked by your control plane. Instead, it all goes through your data plane with the exception of configuration changes. We also touched on security control recommendations, and we're going to go deeper dive into that in our 4th episode, I believe. We're just
that is right. That's right. I just realized we should also give them a bit of an agenda of what we're going to talk today. Otherwise, we're going to just one. So that maybe just let's give a bit of an rundown on agenda. What's on today for?
Perfect. But last week we did. Last thing we covered in last week was an introduction to NGINX Controller, but we'll go into a bit deeper on that as well. So yeah. So
thank you for the recap. It's great. At least I almost forgot it. Too many things happening, and it's good one. So today, Mike is going to do all the heavy lifting. I'm gonna actually literally watch the way how you guys are gonna do. So he's gonna show how he has automated the control plane, which is our NGINX controller, and also I believe I don't know whether he has done it or not. I believe he's also gonna show the automation of NGINX Plus as a data plane. And then it automatically get registered back to the control plane, so that you don't have to worry about managing your NGINX Plus data plane. I hope that is right, Mike.
Oh, I just did the controller. You want an NGINX Plus too?
Yeah, please. That would be good, because it doesn't make any sense just to see the control plane, because people wanted to see how. I know it's hard stuff to do it, right? The NGINX Plus, because normally customers tend to run hundreds of NGINX as their load balancer or even as an API gateway. When they try to manage that, it is having a control plane eases their pain from an operation point of view. We kind of touch base that last week. So let's actually show them as well if you have it.
We have, what do we have? I'm trying to work out what we have here. So we got the recap of the episode and then the NGINX controller architecture.
That's great. Cool. Mike, I got one question before you jump into the detail. You sound little American. So where are you from? What? Yeah, a little.
A little?
Where are you from? Where are you from? What did you? It's something happened this weekend. Did you happen to see it? Just
What?
tell me about you.
You mean something happened Monday morning at like 10 a.m.?
Is it Monday or is it Sunday? Maybe they Sunday or Monday.
Well, Sydney, Australia, yeah, super early in the morning. Which I gotta say, it's rough watching the Super Bowl in the morning because all through your life you watch it in the afternoon on Sunday. Monday you're a little dusty, but you move to Australia and then all of a sudden your Tuesday mornings are a little dusty. You can't have that, right? You can't have that. That's just not proper. It's not right? As they would say in Australia, that's just not cricket, mate. You know
that's
what I mean?
Not a cricket, mate. Exactly. Good on you. All right, let's actually jump into the deal. I mean, we've been talking about ourselves for a while, so let's actually get into the game now. So the NGINX controller. So we talked about this quite a bit last week. NGINX controller being the control plane for the NGINX Plus being a data plane. So as you all know that NGINX Plus can be used as in a multitude of ways. One is as a load balancer, one as a WAF, one as a API gateway. So it's actually realizing all of these functions within an organization is quite easy, but managing them, operating them, and seeing through what's happening through all of this stack is what its biggest challenge. So that particular concern is being addressed through the control plane, where the control plane actually helps you to manage all of these instances, regardless of wherever it's deployed. Let's say it's deployed in Azure, or it's deployed in GCP, or even it's deployed in on-prem. It really doesn't matter. You can register those data planes back to the controller. So I believe I'll pass on to Mike on that one. So let him actually show how he has achieved that automation, Mike, automation, no manual intervention, and realizing that control plane in one of your favorite environment, and see how he has achieved. How do you, Mike?
Not too much involvement from the manual side, but before we jump into that, I just wanted to do a quick high level on the tools that are being used for today's demonstration. So for the automation in your environments, I'm sure a lot of companies you're all with are doing a lot of automation now, but there's so many different ways to do automation. And for this example, for this demonstration, I chose pretty common tools because the most commonly used, they're open source, and they're easy to find help when you need it, right? There's lots of forums, lots of good documentation. So for this demonstration, I used Terraform for the infrastructure as code, so to build the VMs. I used Google Cloud Environment to host those virtual machines. I used Ansible to deploy and configure the instances once they were stood up in Google Cloud. And then I fired all of these scripts from a Docker container.
Docker container. Mike,
Docker container. Yes.
Mike, I got a question here. I am with you until when you said Terraform, Ansible, my favorite tools, automation. Where is Docker came into picture? Why do I need a Docker?
Well, so as you know, we do lots of demos in our line of work, right, Jess? Would you agree?
That is kind of, yeah, I agree.
And sometimes the demos are in different versions. So I found, and I think this is a common practice for infrastructure as code developers, is that I can spin up specific tools, specific versions within a Docker image to launch specific scripts and to test specific scripts, right? So that if we're working with specific customers or we're doing our own development, our own demos, I can build it in one version. The next one I can build in the latest version. And if I need to go back and use a previous script that may have some depreciation warnings or maybe a new feature with an Ansible, I can switch between the Docker containers in order to do that development. So.
Okay, so that makes sense. So you're trying to actually make sure that the same version of Ansible or a Terraform is being used across using. Okay, I got it.
Exactly, cool. Exactly. So I read that in a forum, and I thought that was such a brilliant idea, and it's really helped me along the way in my work. So with that, so Docker's used with it's just a CentOS container. I have Terraform and Ansible installed on there. And then I use a bind mount so that I can have a local directory from my MacBook shared in the container. So as I do my development, all those changes and those saves can, one, remain persistent on my MacBook, and two, I can use an IDE like VS Code, which we're seeing here, to do my development work, which is nice because it comes in and tells me where my mistakes are, what variables I have available, and so forth. So it makes a real nice development environment, real easy to try things out and test things.
How long does it take, Mike, to run and install this controller? Are you going to run it now?
So that is a fantastic question, and that's a good segue. That's fantastic. So the first Terraform script here is the deployment of Terraform, NGINX Controller, and with NGINX Controller, minimum requirements is around 8 CPUs and 16 gigs of memory, I believe.
That sounds about right.
Sounds about right, and that's for a production environment. You could probably get away with a little less if you're doing a demo like this, but I did, for our purposes, spec quite a large instance. But when that instance is stood up in Google Cloud, for my usage, for my demo here, I actually needed to upload the controller code, which is a little over a gig tarball that you would pull down from your MyF5 portal, along with the license. And so when the script kicks off and builds the VM for controller with those resources that I mentioned before, it has to upload that tarball. And I'm on a fantastic NBN connection here in Sydney, but it's not fantastic enough to complete that upload within the time allotted for our demonstration. So for the sake of this demo, I did run the controller script before we begun, so we didn't have to sit through that. And I can walk through the code and how it's done. And it's also available on our GitHub page.
I'm about to ask that, Mike. If you would have already done it, I really need the code to test whether you really automate it or not.
Exactly. So I get lots of feedback on all the mistakes I made, which I think it would be helpful if anybody was interested. But hopefully, we're seeing the link below for the GitHub page where you can follow along. If this font's too small for you, or you happen to be on a mobile device and you want to see the code later on, it is available there, and we'll leave that up. But what I have demonstrated here on the screen is actually our main Terraform script for the NGINX controller. So what I built was the deployment of the controller, and then I built another Terraform script for the deployment of the NGINX Plus instances, which I'll demo a little bit further on.
Mike, before you go further, I wanted to say something, if you're okay with it. I heard you saying that you're trying to upload the controller every time and through this Ansible and Terraform one. One other option, what we could achieve is you could actually push that one time into, probably depends on which cloud you're using. If it's AWS, it is S3, or to a cloud storage bucket in GCP. And there is a way you can mount it to your VM. So that way you don't have to do this again and again next time if you're doing. Just a thought.
No, that's actually a great idea. I did talk about possibly moving it into an artifact repository within Google Cloud, but then we'd still have to download it to the image, and then since it's tarball, we'd still have to extract it. So you're right; that is an excellent suggestion. Drive already expanded would be, and then we just attach it and then install it, and then
good. Yeah, it could definitely reduce the time it's being used. So that's cool. Thank you.
That'd save a lot of time. Maybe we'll try that next time.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. And then also with controllers deployment, we often recommend, it uses a Postgres database. In production environments, we recommend that you attach to a production grade Postgres database that you can back up and restore for your production. But for our demo and for testing, as you may be doing in the future, we have a feature where a Postgres database can actually be installed locally on the controller. So for this instance, I used a lot of resources, even though it's a demo environment, so that I could run that Postgres database at a good performance and good speed. Another option that isn't included in the demo here, but you have in your production deployment of NGINX Controller, is HA. So we do have the ability for an active standby. If you're making multiple API changes per day, your controller instance would become quite critical to your business. And so high availability is something you would take into consideration for your architecture of your NGINX controller deployment.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike, about this DBA, the database, the Postgres database. It's quite important to know since you're not treating this as a production environment. It's being embedded with it's an internal database to the controller. It's actually the way how we have done is we made it's quite easier to install it with the controller though, so that you don't have to go and install a Postgres database externally for the demo or a testing purpose, as you mentioned correctly. But when you go to production, we recommend highly to go with one of the managed Postgres database given by a cloud provider, which is, you don't have to worry about managing those database and things. So, and it's easier to, connect the controller to a managed Postgres database. So which we highly recommend if you are in one of the cloud environment. Otherwise, we still have a way of, if you are actually doing internal in production as well, where some of our customers have done that, where it actually with the current release, it gives you a daily backup if you are using an internal database. So you have options in case if you choose to go both ways, but we have our recommended option.
Do you know, does HA have to be, both instances have to be in the same cloud, or could we spread them between clouds?
Between clouds is fine as well. So that is the beauty of the controller, right? So controller can run in one of the cloud A, and the cloud B, cloud C can be actually have one, and then if it's pointing to the database, it should be all right.
Okay. I'd just be interested, in the past we've seen AWS outages if your controller would stay up, running in a separate cloud instance. So that might be an option for HA.
Yeah,
as well.
That's true. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So so now we switch to the walkthrough of the code. So again, this is the main script for the NGINX controller deployment. And you can see in here, I used the Google Cloud provider, to create the compute instance, naming it, define the machine type. And the script, I have a lot of variables in a variable file in the script. And we can see here, this is the same as the GitHub repository, but in the script here, I have a variables file, not that one. There we go, variables file, where I've defined all the variables for the instance. So the image size, the operating system that's gonna go on the VM, the region I want it installed in, of course I want it close, project ID, prefix. As you can see here, the prefix is what we use in our Google environment. We have a lot of employees using the same Google environment. So for prefix, I used my username, or actually part of my username, to go through and define the instance there so that people who also use it can know that it's me doing these testing and these demos. I go on down and define a boot disk. So I said, okay, I wanted 100 gigs. I got a startup script that just makes sure that the Ubuntu deployment is up to date. So I do a sudo apt-get update here. Then I define a network interface. So for this NGINX controller deployment, I did have a single interface. It gets a local IP by default using the default VPC. And then it gets an external IP address, a NAT address assigned as well, which is what we'll use to interface with the controller going forward. Then this little bit here, the provisioner remote exec, is one of many solutions, just the one that I used, where I test the SSH connection to make sure that the instance is up and fully operational before I kick off the next section, which is to deploy or just kick off my Ansible playbook. So what this bit of code here highlight does is it just does an SSH connection until it works. And then once it works, we continue on to the next, the local exec. Which just makes sure it's up. And you can see here, the variable here we define as host is what's returned when the Google Cloud VM instance is stood up and the IP addresses have been assigned. So the NAT IP is what gets put there in its place to test the SSH.
So with that provisioner, you're making sure that the machine is ready before you execute anything else on top of it.
Exactly. Because you don't want your Ansible playbook to kick off because it runs locally, but then it SSHs into the instance to actually do the install. So you can see here, one's a remote exec provisioner and the other one's a local exec. So that's with relationship to where you're running the Terraform script. So then we kick off our local exec, and of course we've got to go to the Ansible directory, which you'll see over here is right here. And then we execute the playbook, We provide the inventory with the new IP address we just got from Google Cloud for our new controller instance VM. We go and we provide a private key. So as you can see, when we did the deployment of the VM, somewhere we provided a key image. Oh, you know what? It's down here further in the bottom. Metadata for the image here to provide SSH key. So we provide that here in the Ansible playbook here so that it can SSH and use a private key to access the instance. And then as an extra variable, I've assigned the controller IP here as the network IP. So this is the actual local IP address of the instance. And so the reason I did that is so that when we stand up NGINX Plus instances, it's going to be within the same VPC within Google Cloud, and it wouldn't want to use the external NAT address to register to your controller instance. It would want to use the local address since it'll be on the same subnet in this particular demo. So that's why I send it as an extra variable, because we don't know what it is until the VM's been stood up. And then finally, run the install controller Ansible playbook.
Mike, I just realized we already passed 20 minutes. The time is flying. So this is what happened. This is what happens when Mike starts to talk about Ansible and Terraform. He totally forgets the time, what's happening. And especially when it merges with the controller and NGINX Plus, somebody have to be there to remind him, hey, Mike, the time is running out. So it's 20 minutes now. So
I blame the Super Bowl, actually, Rajesh.
Absolutely. I thought so.
So we jump to our install controller Ansible playbook. And now I just want to highlight a couple places in here where we used Ansible roles. So NGINX has done a great job providing a lot of pre-packaged Ansible roles within Ansible Galaxy. So the link should be below now for that. But if you are configuring any NGINX controllers, NGINX Plus, you're deploying your API management solution, don't write the Ansible yourself. Take advantage of these Ansible roles that have been written for you. So if we go back to VS Code and we look through here, I do some standard build stuff, setting the passwords for sudo and su. I go through and I got a couple debug messages that tell me where we are. We extract the tarball, which we mentioned before, takes a few minutes to do. There's a few prerequisites that are we just validate that are on the box, and if they're not, we do an install. And then for this instance here, I actually install a entry into the host file, so the FQDN of the controller, and the IP address that was assigned. So you remember I passed in that IP address when I called the Ansible playbook. This is where I use it to write to the host file. And that way the controller instance can use its fully qualified domain name to access itself instead of using the controller's IP. And then we jump down here to the install controller section. And you can see here, this is where my first use of Ansible roles provided by NGINX comes in here. So this is copied straight from the NGINX Inc. Ansible Galaxy site. And I also included it in the GitHub repository that you all have access to. Then as we go down here, I set some environment variables. And then this final bit here is where once the controller has come up, I request an authentication token, again, using a provided Ansible role. And then I go through and I license the controller myself. So once this is done, we can jump into the controller and it's stood up, and we can log in with the credentials that we provided at install. And we can go in and we can see that we have a fresh NGINX controller instance. And you can see here the green banner at the top is because I went and got a free trial license from MyF5. So if you have a MyF5 login, you're able to request a free demo license as well. And this is what shows up in controller when you do that. So if we go here to the platform section, you can see my instance has been stood up with my eval license all automatically done from the Ansible script. And if we continue through and look at the infrastructure, we can see here that we have no instances installed, which is going to.
I was about to ask that, Mike.
Okay.
I want to see whether there is no instance already added, so the control plane doesn't have any references to the data plane. So that is good. Mike, just to step back, I have just for my own understanding. So what you have achieved, whatever you just walked us through, is the Terraform spins up the instances and it creates those VM, creates the environment, it makes it ready. Once it does, then your Ansible code goes and push the controller to the dedicated VM, and then it actually installs it. So this is what, if I take this GitHub code, I can do all of this, what you just explained.
Exactly. Yep. It's all there. Some of the variable files you need to change in for your own variables. I mentioned that on the README for the GitHub site, but I really wanted to leverage the best of each development tool, for the strengths, right? So Terraform's really strong at deploying infrastructure as code, right? Really strong at deploying those VMs, the providers for AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, and it's real simple to code that in. But it's not as simple to then configure all the information on the instance, right? Installing software, ensuring services are running, which is a strength that Ansible has, right? So being able to use both together is leveraging the strengths of each one. And that's what I'm trying to show here with this deployment.
That's cool. Mike, I mean, as I mentioned, are you going to automate at least to show the installation of NGINX Plus that get registered back the control plane? Because I noticed in your control plane that the number of the NGINX Plus instances are empty, which is good in a way, because I want this to be done live so that at least people can see that it get installed, the NGINX Plus as a data plane get installed and then registered back to the control plane. That actually completes our purpose for today.
Definitely.
You think you can do that?
Today is your lucky day, Rajesh, because I have just that demo for you. So before we talk,
I hope it works.
Yeah, no, me too, right? How embarrassing is that when you run your example and it doesn't work? So I'll just kick this off now. We're going to kick off the Terraform script to start the deployment of the NGINX Plus instances.
So this is the data plane installation.
This is the data plane installation. And then while it's running, because I know you all want to watch all the text coming by, I'm just going to talk about the Terraform script that ran. And it's got a lot of similarities from the controller bit. So again, the VM instances are deployed from Terraform. The configuration of each individual VM instance is configured by Ansible. So same thing. We go through here, we do a different machine type. I have a different naming scheme. I use that same prefix that we talked about, my username. And then in this case here, I wanted to kick off 3 instances. So not just one instance, but I wanted to show how powerful it was to just kick off multiple instances at once. And in this particular environment, you could have one instance for test, one instance for prod, one instance for a dev portal. So it's handy to be able to go in and change one variable here and be able to deploy 20, 100, right? Or 1. So we go through here. So the same stuff we see, boot disk is created, network interface is created. We get a network address. We test and see that the SSH is available. And then we run our Ansible playbook where we pass in our NATed address for the NGINX Plus instances, because we've got more than one. And then the private key remains static. And then we run our Ansible playbook for install plus. And if we jump over to that real quick, very similar to the configuration of NGINX Controller, we go through, we define FQDN in the host file for the NGINX Controller because it has to register, the NGINX Plus instance needs to register with Controller, so it has to be able to find it. And then I added a few extra things here when installing NGINX Plus. I also install NGINX App Protect along with it, and we're going to cover that in more detail in our 4th episode. So I'm not going to go into too much detail with that now. And then I use this Ansible role here again, another NGINX provided Ansible role to generate the token as well as register the instance to NGINX Controller. So you can see we go through here, we get the API key, which you need to download the controller agent from Controller, as well as register your NGINX Plus instance with Controller.
Why do I need a token here? to
So
authenticate?
Oh, okay, yeah. It's so we use this token so that we can make the API call. So you can see here
Okay.
in this URI here, we make a request against the NGINX Controller FQDN. So that's a Jinja2 variable, API, VI platform global, and then we send credentials, basic auth credentials, and then we get our return. We get a cookie here, a session cookie for NGINX Controller auth token. And then we take that variable, and then again, this is that role that I mentioned here, the NGINX Controller agent. We provide that API key, and then it starts the install of the NGINX Controller agent on the NGINX Plus instance. So each of the 3 instances are configured individually. So Terraform builds a VM for 1 and then launches Ansible, builds a VM for 2, then launches Ansible, builds a VM for 3 in this instance and launches Ansible. So we can see it's running through here quite quickly, doing its updates. It's installing the repos for NGINX App Protect, NGINX Plus. It's doing the threat campaign updates. It's doing the signature updates. And you can see it's running for each one.
I got a question, Mike. So with your with here, the way how I see is it needs the controller to be installed first. Like it's kind of a prerequisite because you're using the controller endpoint to be part of the NGINX Plus installation. Is my understanding correct?
Correct. Yes, definitely have to have NGINX Controller. That's actually a really good point. You definitely can't register your NGINX Plus instances without having Controller available.
Controller. So it's a great idea then. Then you actually, it seems you have separated those 2 projects, actually 2 different Terraform Ansible project. One is controller installation and this, so I can actually run this or manage this separately.
Definitely. So yeah, so you can stand up your instances, you can tear them down. I do have a separate script which is in the GitHub repo, which actually destroys your NGINX Plus instances and deregisters them from controller. So a way to scale up, scale down in your controller instance there, if that's what you need to do. But you can see here that our 3 instances were deployed and registered with controller, and so we're ready to now start configuring our NGINX Plus instances.
So this is like the data planes are currently available that automatically get registered to the control plane now. So now I can actually start to push the configs, the directives into this layer, whether I'm going to use this as a load balancer or as a WAF or as API gateway, I can use this. Is that what?
Exactly. With two Terraform applies, I've got a controller, fully provisioned, licensed, and then I've got 3 NGINX instances, provisions, licensed, and added to the NGINX Controller instance.
Okay, Mike, this is cool, but at the same time, I also do not believe that this automation can deregister this. Do you really have an automation for that? What if I have to scale up or scale down? Let's say scale down. I want to remove all those NGINX. Is that possible to do it?
That is. So I did mention the destroy script, remove plus. So this is an Ansible script that I created here that you can see it's significantly shorter because it again, once you run the Terraform destroy for the NGINX Plus instance script, it goes through, disables each of the controller agent services on each of the NGINX Plus instances, and then tells Google Cloud to destroy the VM. So we deregister from controller, then we shut down the VM. So it's a way of clean destruction of your NGINX Plus instances.
Well, that's cool. So what happens when you click on the, okay, so you can specify what the type, description, status is running. So it actually shows the status of on what state those NGINX Plus instances are there. Nice.
Exactly, it's doing a heartbeat between the controller agent and the NGINX Controller instance to make sure that those NGINX Plus instances are alive and well. But you mentioned earlier, you pointed out the URI and why we needed the auth token. And I just wanted to highlight real quick the documentation that's available for this. So
I'm about to ask that as well.
If there's a piece that I didn't cover in here, and you need to go through and install and update your own NGINX controller, I just want to highlight that there is an API reference available. So I didn't just have all this secret information because I work for NGINX. I actually use this publicly available API reference here. And you can see it walks through all the definitions, your authentication, how to create providers, publish APIs. But this authentication here is how I went and did, how I found out how to send the request and what credentials needed to be sent to get that auth token. So it's all available.
This one is quite good, Mike. What we should do for the next week, we should actually show the guys how we can automate even through these APIs by onboarding, stuff through the controller into the data plane. Maybe that would be a good demo to showcase, just to go through all those APIs through an automated fashion.
I think it's fantastic that we named next week's episode Configure. I think that's just the perfect segue. I think, maybe we planned that. Did we plan that?
I think now we planned it on the fly. We are doing that.
I had no idea what we were doing before.
Yeah. Mike, I think we are closer to the time, and I have a belief the guys are actually piling up a lot of questions. Let's get into the question. Is there anything else you want to talk about other than saying thank you to me for supporting?
Yes. You know what? While we're start the questions here, let's go ahead and start answering them. I will just complete the demo by doing the destroy and running that other script that I had shown, just to prove.
Oh yeah,
that it worked. Because I know.
That, by the way, I do. You know that I don't trust you on that.
Exactly. Yeah. Not like I would have spent all week writing this and testing it.
You pray that it is going to work.
No.
Okay. In the meantime, let me actually look for any questions. Someone called Chase Alexander. Does it make sense to use only one of either Ansible or Terraform? Well, there you go. Does it have to be both? Why or why not? He covered like folded question into a single line. Mike.
Yes, so you can. You're right. You're absolutely right. You can run Terraform, and we've done other demos where I think Rajesh did a fantastic demo where you stood up. I know you did one where you did the Packer, so you did HashiCorp's Packer where you built the images, then used Terraform to deploy it, right?
Yeah.
Did you also do one where you had Terraform and then it ran a bash script to do the configuration of the VM when it stood up? Did you do that one as well?
Yeah, I was actually trying to do both. One is Ansible is more of a pre-packaged one where we're expecting the customers to build the VMs as part of their build pipeline, and Terraform uses the images straight away from the image repository. That's one way I did it. The other way was, as you said, wrote quite a lot of shell script and get executed as part of which I realized that's too tedious to control the Terraform, because it's too much. Terraform is a very, very declarative way of actually defining the whole environment, and then I realized it's not a great way. But there are people who actually, a huge lover of Terraform would love to go that way. But I quite love the way how you achieved it. Taking the whole provisioning, infrastructure provisioning, giving the responsibility to the Terraform, and Ansible actually go and configure things. For example, I noticed you're making API calls to get the authentication token, and you were trying to do all those orchestration. I do not think Terraform is meant to do that, because you can do it. It's not that you can do it, but you have to write quite a lot of shell script to do it, and some race conditions, how you can capture it. With Ansible, I noticed you have single line, which is already defined as a roles, and you just make a call and it just work out of the box. I quite love the way how you married the Terraform and Ansible as a good couple.
The strength of the Ansible, because the flip side of the question is why we didn't just use Ansible for the whole deployment. And you're right, we could have done that as well. But some of the pluses to Ansible are that, one, we can reuse a lot of code. So there's a lot of code that I didn't have to write because those Ansible roles were provided. But on the flip side there, with each Ansible task, you're making another API call to somewhere, right? You're doing a lot of work. And if you had to go and deploy your infrastructure, you may have to run multiple tasks to deploy multiple instances, right? Whereas with Terraform, you saw I put count 3, and I know you can do loops in Ansible, you can do that as well. But being able to do one page and define the network interfaces and more of a declarative model than an iterative model, right? And I think Terraform really gives that strength there. So it has a bit of strength over the Ansible. So that's why I chose to use both. And mainly made the demo a bit spicier. So who doesn't like a spicy demo?
Hey Mike, I just realized that there is someone called Boris answered this question. Look like he's much smarter than us. He answered exactly what we've been talking here in a fine-grained one. So it's good. So somebody answered it straight away.
Right.
Where you are installing Ansible when creating VMs.
You want me to do that one?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the discussion, we talked about all the tools that I use for this demo, and Docker was one of them that we used. So where Terraform and Ansible, the executables were installed, the binaries, they were installed in a Docker container, and the Docker container, I just use CentOS as the base of the container. And then, like I said at the beginning too, that just really helps keep my Terraform and Ansible versions consistent across this demo. So if I need to do this demo, 2 months from now, when Ansible, 2.20 comes out, I would be able to bring up this particular container, running all the tools and versions, and know that I'm going to have a successful deployment, right? Whereas I could have another container tomorrow and update it with whatever the latest Ansible and Terraform versions are, and start development on the latest and greatest, right?
Just to add that, Kuldeep Sharma adds, Ansible is being install it like it's a master. It's how do they say? I don't want to use this master slave anymore. What's the best way of telling that, Mike?
What do you mean? So as far as controller?
Because no, from comparing Ansible to any other like Chef or Puppet, the Puppets and Chef need the agent. This Ansible is agentless. So to pinpoint the answer to your question, Ansible get installed in a machine where you are running the Terraform itself, which means in your local machine run it. Ansible actually does the SSH and does all this orchestration, all this configuration within your VM. That's the beauty of Ansible. It's more of an agentless orchestrated tool.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. I misunderstood the question. That's definitely
no. That's the first part. I just finished the second part. That's it. So the next one is Ravi S. To test these Terraform scripts against Azure platform side, I hope that we have to change the code some extent. Ravi, you know what? Hey, Mike, if you don't mind picking up this, don't worry. Just give us a couple of days. Mike is good with GCP. I'm okay with Azure. So that side of the code will be published along with this one. So we'll be supporting both Azure as well as this very, very soon. Just hold on to it. I couldn't complete it. Mike is a little faster than me, so he published that bit. So Azure will come very, very soon.
Well, and I think too that goes back to the 2 questions ago. Why would we use Terraform and Ansible? And another example of the strength of Terraform is we just changed the provider to AWS to Azure, and it's probably going to be similar syntax for the boot disk creation, the network image, machine type, so on and so forth. So
I agree. Cool. So next one is again Kuldeep. So they are using it to standardize, which is, I guess, the image type 0. Not sure they have customized that already. No, I don't think you customized. Did you? Did you customize the VM once you provision with the Terraform? I thought you are pretty much preparing that control installation through Ansible. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's exactly what Kuldeep is trying to understand. Did you prepare that? Did you customize that VM?
So what you're meaning is, help me understand the question here. So I use Terraform to build the VM instance, and then I kick off a Ansible playbook to configure the instance.
So okay, I think that's what I wanted to know. I believe. I think the image type is not sure they have customized it. The customization is done through the Ansible. So you are in the control of how that needs to be customized.
Right. Yes. So and within, if you look back, I mentioned the Ansible gallery and the roles. If you pick one, for example, here's the NGINX Controller role. To configure NGINX Controller install, you can see that they give an example. As soon as my screen refreshes here, they give an example of how to run it in Ansible, and they let you know each of the variables that need to be populated and what they need to be populated with, along with if they have any default values and if they're required. So when you go and use, for example, in this instance here, the NGINX Controller role to configure your NGINX Controller, you would populate all these variables as for your environment. So if you're using an external PostSQL database, if you're uploading a tarball that needs to be extracted, or any of these SNMTP servers, or any of these variables, you would need to fill those out if they don't have a default value, and the default value isn't what you're looking to use. But then they give you an example playbook of how to launch the role to do the actual configuration. So this example here is exactly what I started with. I cut and paste it right into VS Code, and then customize it for what I needed for our demo environment, right? Like I said before, I'm using a local database. I don't have any HA in this demo. The tarball needed to be uploaded to a specific directory, so on and so forth. So those are the customizations I did. But again, the power of Ansible is that I can reuse this code. I didn't have to know how to install NGINX Controller. All I needed to know was the values that needed to go in each of these variables, right? Which are pretty self-explanatory.
Thanks, Mike. I think we're pretty much closer to the one. Maybe this one as a last question. VM image is a standard one. Not getting the question what that means. VM image is a standard one.
I did use a standard Ubuntu 18.04 for the NGINX Plus and the NGINX Controller instance. So maybe they're just saying that it mounted a boot drive that was a standard image from Google Cloud. Is that what they're?
Yeah, possibly. Hey, we are pretty much running out of time. Maybe let's actually wrap it up with this one. If you guys have more questions, please don't hesitate. Please feel free to shoot us email on our support. We are happy to actually assist you if you need more help. Let's actually wrap up with this last question. Want to understand the Docker part? Okay, see, same question coming back. Why are you using Docker? Where it is getting injected to VM? No, I do not think Mike is actually injecting the Docker. Docker is running on his local machine, where he actually separated his local machine away from installing Ansible and Terraform. He installed Terraform, he installed Ansible on the Docker image, so that the Docker image can have a contained version of it. So if you're playing with Terraform or Ansible, the biggest challenge what you will have is the version, managing the version. There is no way it's easily you can manage the version differences between, I think the latest one is 0.14, and they quickly change it every 2 months or 3 months, and there may be some broken changes coming through it. To overcome that, what Mike has done is to have run the Docker as a separate instance on the local and segregated that bit. So that is why Docker. So it is not injected anywhere. It is pretty much running on his machine, and that Docker machine is what it is actually trying to communicate to the GCP to do all of this, whatever he has achieved. So you don't have to do it. You can actually use Terraform or Ansible installed in your own Mac or PC. Just run it. It's fine unless you can manage the versions by yourself.
Yeah. Oh, just one other point too. The most common use case for using the Docker instance with specific version of your tools is you might have a production version that's stable, but you might want to test your scripts and update them for a newer version. Let's say you're upgrading your Ansible tools or your Terraform. You can have both tools running simultaneously in your development environment.
Mikey, you owe me $3 because you're 3 minutes over the limit. So I think it's time for us to wrap up.
So what are we doing next week?
Next week is, you showed the APIs, all the APIs available. I think we should automate it. We should automate end-to-end of how to onboard things, how to onboard configuration through the controller into all the data planes, what you just showed us. So that means it completes the automation. It completes the automation that I have the infrastructure. Now, how do I actually configure those data planes to act as a load balancer or act as an API gateway? That would be it for next week. You up for it?
You know what? I'll give it a crack.
Let's see. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.